Nazi Germany. We all know what they did, how they did it, who suffered, who perpetrated. But here's what many of us don't know. The Holocaust was not Germany's first genocide. During the 19th century scramble for Africa, Imperial Germany invaded the land we now call Namibia. In 1904, after much of their lands and cattle were stolen, and many of their people were forced into slavery, the Herero tribe revolted against the German colonizers. When the German military arrived with their advanced weaponry, they severely outmatched the Herero fighters and quickly decimated the rebellion. During surrender negotiations, German officials double-crossed the Herero, killing thousands of fighters. The military pursued fleeing Herero across the Kalahari Desert, and at one point, generals ordered the murder of every man in the Herero tribe. Eventually, survivors of this extermination campaign were rounded up and put in concentration camps, where they suffered in much the same way as Jews, Romani, and others would in the Holocaust just 3 decades later. In the next year, after the Nama tribe staged a similar rebellion, they were put in the camps as well. By 1908, tens of thousands of people from both tribes had been murdered by Germany in the first genocide of the 20th century. After the fall of Nazi Germany in Europe, many anti-imperialist scholars began to notice how the violence of the Third Reich had been foreshadowed by all the violence in Europe's colonies, from the millions slaughtered and enslaved in the Belgian Congo, to the decimation of indigenous populations in the Americas, to the aforementioned Herero and Nama genocide. In his 1950 essay titled Discourse on Colonialism, Aimé Césaire wrote, "And then one fine day, the bourgeoisie is awakened by a terrific boomerang effect. The Gestapos are busy, the prisons fill up, the torturers standing around the racks invent, refine, discuss. People are surprised. They hide the truth from themselves, that before they were its victims, they were its accomplices, that they tolerated that Nazism before it was inflicted on them, that they absolved it, shut their eyes to it, legitimized it, because, until then, it had only been applied to non-European peoples, that they had cultivated that Nazism, that they are responsible for it, and that before engulfing the entire edifice of Western Christian civilization in its reddened waters, it oozes, seeps, and trickles from every crack." What Césaire describes here is exactly how Germany took the weapons they developed when committing genocide towards the Herero and Nama people at the start of the 20th century and used them to a devastating effect in Europe to commit mass murder on a scale even greater. This is the Imperial Boomerang. First described by Aimé Césaire in Discourse on Colonialism, is a phenomenon where Western countries' colonial strategies end up being turned inwards and weaponized against their own citizens. The American rule class has fully embraced the Imperial Boomerang, most crucially through the institution of the police. Using the guise of quote-unquote law enforcement, capitalists in the United States take population control tactics from the outskirts of the empire and mobilize them against the people whose interests they claim to be representing. Let's dive into how cops came to be, what they do, and how they exemplify the Imperial Boomerang. The United States was not always a global empire. It used to just be a continental one. As a continental empire, it was divided into 2 sections, the North and the South. In the early days of America, the North was dominated by merchants and farmers, while the South was slave country. Slaves harvested raw materials like rice, cotton, and tobacco that was exported to the North and overseas. In the early 1700s, rice harvesting slaves in the Carolinas were running away and rising up, and masters knew that they had to do something as these acts hurt their profits. So they started the slave patrol, with each officer giving a simple oath. "I, patroller's name, do swear that I will, as searcher for guns, swords, and other weapons among the slaves in my district, faithfully and as privately as I can, discharge the trust reposed in me as the law directs, to the best of my power, so help me God." The slave patrols were the first modern-day police, tasked with upholding the system of slavery by catching slaves and squashing rebellions. Then, when the Civil War replaced slavery in public with slavery in prisons, we got Jim Crow laws, not just in the South, but in the North too, with the former slave patrols enforcing the subjugation, segregation, and at the end of the day, slavery of black people under a new doctrine, law and order. And now, cops didn't just keep slaves under their boots, they kept all of us under them. Though urban law enforcement has existed for a while, mostly just enforcing small-scale xenophobic drinking laws. That's where the paddy wagon comes from. It wasn't until the late 1800s when they would evolve into the functional militaries of today we call police departments. And the event that sparked this evolution shows exactly why we call police the lapdogs of the elite. It was a workers' strike. On July 16, 1877, 40 workers shut down rail traffic in West Virginia. At a crucial moment in history, where wages were being slashed left and right, their call to action was picked up across the nation. Workers across industries walked off the job and joined the strike. Trains were set on fire in Pittsburgh. A commune took control of St. Louis. In response, thousands of federal troops were called into cities and civilians were deputized into the military. These groups teamed up with the city's small-scale police forces to violently put down the strikes. And when the dust had cleared, it was clear to the rich that something needed to be done. And that something was clear. They needed to beef up their cops. Over the next few decades, the rich would donate huge sums of money to cities' police forces, giving them stronger and stronger weapons in their war on the working class. Though police were technically public servants, their entire apparatus became propped up by the wealthy, and these cops knew not to look a gift horse in the mouth. So, time and time again, police would take the side of employees in labor disputes, while courts and legislators looked the other way. It's shocking how simply the first product of the Imperial Boomerang came about. Masters used the slave patrol to keep their slaves in line. Then, seeing how successful this tactic was, employers used the police to keep their employees in line. The oppressor's use of a quote-unquote public body to enforce subjugation on the oppressed transcended economic systems and exemplified the importation of colonial tactics into the imperial core. But of course, the ruling class wasn't done with police there. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, America and Europe ramped up their throwing of the Imperial Boomerang around the world. Seeking new materials and markets, Western imperialists colonized most of the global south, both directly through invasions like the Scramble for Africa, and indirectly through economic domination like the Chinese Century of Humiliation. America's activity abroad in this time, from Panama to the Philippines, cemented its status as an imperialist nation. Just as Nazi Germany imported concentration camps from their colonies like Namibia, so too has America imported its own colonial tactics, especially in the context of the police, from a certain country in the Middle East it likes to supply a lot of support to. I'm of course talking about the most glaring example of America's Imperial Boomerang of police can be seen when looking at Israel, the empire's closest ally. In its 80-year history, Israel has received over $300 billion in U.S. aid, making it by far the largest recipient of American support. This doesn't even take into account all the American companies with heavy investments in Israel, from military contractors like Boeing and General Dynamics to surveillance tech companies like Microsoft and Google. As an outpost of American capital, Israel has made Palestine a testing ground for many of these corporations' strategies of repression back in the United States. Technologies like surveillance drones that collect information on protesters and social credit algorithms that determine which members of the population are likely to be quote-unquote terrorists have been tested by Israel against Palestinians and are likely being implemented as we speak by America against its own citizens. Many police departments from across the United States, as well as pretty much all law enforcement bodies like ICE and the FBI, use taxpayer dollars to contract training programs with the Israeli military and police, where they promote and extend discriminatory, repressive practices like mass surveillance, racial profiling, and excessive force. A 2018 research report titled Deadly Exchange: The Dangerous Consequences of American Law Enforcement Trainings in Israel exposed many of the ways Israeli occupation tactics are imperially boomeranged back to the United States using corporate support. Let's look at a couple of the case studies Deadly Exchange took note of.
Visual monitoring. American police officers on tour regularly visit the network of 400 cameras which blankets the old city of Jerusalem and monitors Palestinian movement. Following visits to Israel by the Atlanta police, The department created a video integration center, collecting and monitoring footage from the city's thousands of public and private 24-hour surveillance cameras. The Atlanta Police Department reported that the center is modeled after the Command and Control Center in the Old City of Jerusalem, and mimics Israeli methods to proactively monitor crime. These exchanges create opportunities for Israeli security corporations that manufacture and market networked surveillance to obtain details and contracts in the United States. In Baltimore, a camera network for the City Watch program is operated by the Israeli company Nice Systems. Nice Systems and Israeli company variants also have contracts with the LAPD. Celebrite, an Israeli company specialized in technology to collect data from cell phones, has contracts with police departments and law enforcement agencies in at least 20 states. Joint trainings of U.S. and Israeli military and police also help facilitate the sales and transfer of crowd-controlling technologies between the two governments. Developed by the Israeli police and manufactured by Israeli company Odortech, skunk is a foul-smelling liquid designed to cause nausea that is sprayed at high pressure onto protesters, where it lingers for days on clothing, skin, and in the air. Skunk is used by the IDF as a tool of collective punishment that is deliberately sprayed onto stores, schools, houses, yards, and fruit orchards of communities whose members participate in demonstrations. Based on its proven effectiveness against Palestinian protests, particularly in West Bank village demonstrations against the separation barrier, Israel markets skunk to police units worldwide, including departments in the United States. The American company Mistral Security reportedly began selling skunk to U.S. police departments, including the St. Louis Metropolitan Police, following the 2014 protests in Ferguson. Mistral Security advertises the product as applicable to border crossings, correctional facilities, demonstrations, and sit-ins.
These studies make clear the deep connection between the colonial hub of America and its outpost in Israel. I can't stress enough how these surveillance strategies and crowd control technologies are tested on Palestinians on behalf of the American empire, so the empire can better keep us in line back home, in the belly of the beast. This is the Imperial Boomerang in action. So there we have it. Cops are innately tied to the Imperial Boomerang. They originated from colonial slave management strategy, evolved into lapdogs of the capitalist elite, and use overseas occupation and genocide to train their domestic repression. The links between police and the Imperial Boomerang may be cut and dry, but what about other aspects of the American experience? What about more current events? Well, stay tuned to this channel, because next time on the Imperial Boomerang, we're going to talk about how the war on Venezuela, the bombings of Nigeria, ICE, and more are connected to the deeply sinister phenomenon of the Imperial Boomerang. But until then, stay safe out there, and be sure to organize and educate with your community. Thank you for watching.